Hello and welcome to Just 5 Minutes, where we try to cram everything possible into around about 5 minutes. And this is the pheonix edition, because we did try a couple of episodes before Christmas, but it fizzled a little bit. Hopefully we're going to be a little bit more regular with this this time going forward. So what we're talking about is Azure Functions, and more broadly, Functions as a Service, or FaaS, FaaS. Which is by no means limited to just Microsoft Azure. You've got AWS Lambda. The whole serverless sort of movement is available on lots of different platforms, including Netlify, which is a great place for working with what they're now calling JAMStacks, which maybe that's another subject. But today we're talking about Azure Functions. So ultimately, where it's gone from is where you used to host your own application, to virtual machines, to then having app services where you're essentially just deploying the application, but you're not worrying about the service. And now you've got down where it's broken apart completely to where you can literally create a function. And that is exactly it. It's a function to do a specific thing. So you can independently deploy these small functions, but you've got no application infrastructure to worry about. And obviously they can be independently deployed. Okay, so so generally speaking, where you've created like a monolithic application in the past, you can still technically share data between functions by use of queues and storage mechanisms and event management, pubsub patterns, etc. But generally, functions in general are isolated. That's the whole benefit, that they can be, again, independently managed and deployed without having to test a whole application infrastructure. So, so it is great for that sort of world. You're not really, even though this is really Azure Functions, which is Microsoft Azure, yes, you've always got platform lock-in at some stage, but however, the Azure Functions runtime is also available as a container. So theoretically, you've got portability that way. So that's an interesting one. I'm sure lots of the other vendors have got something similar as well. Talking of deployment, as we mentioned, in the past, I found, anyway, personally, it was a case of either sort of going into Microsoft Azure portal and deploying, a function, or publishing it from Visual Studio. But what I have to say is, and there's a video to go along with this, is that I'm using GitHub, and I can create, okay, it's in Visual Studio, but I can create my Azure function with an app with several functions. I've got a very basic API, which is a get person, add person, that type of thing. But I can deploy that. I can just push that to GitHub, and there's an Azure service called Kudu. There is Azure Devops that you can use, and several other CI/CD type applications. But I'm using something built into Azure called Kudu, Kudu. And the reason being, it's just very simple. I can match that up to my GitHub repository, whichever branch, master or release or whatever, and it will deploy those functions. And the whole function app, the whole deployment on Azure, can be scripted in several different ways as well. So you can actually regenerate the whole infrastructure as well as the actual code. Okay, so that's a pretty handy thing. And again, Azure Functions you can utilize in a microservice world, where not other examples would be you've got smaller Docker containers all running as a big mesh, I guess. But you can actually certainly use Azure Functions in a microservice world with queuing, storage mechanisms. It's got things like event grid, pubsub patterns, things of that nature. And the final side of that is that released, well, relatively recently, it's been around for a while actually, but something called Azure Durable Functions, which essentially is an orchestration methodology, I suppose, of those functions. So again, if you want to know when one function finishes, two other functions left to run, it can do that. It can also do things like, well, function A, B, and C have to complete first with whatever status that is before functions, X, Y, Z get executed. But also with those durable functions, the orchestration can be, well, function X, rather than run just one instance, it might want to run 10, 20 instances. So you've got that type of like orchestration that you can actually apply. So it's quite a powerful technology, and again, you can actually have these things containerized. But in this example and the video that I'll be posting that goes along with a really basic example of what we've been talking about, that's going through using, like I say, just straight Azure. So there we go. So that's a really basic walkthrough. As I say, there's a video to go along with this one because it's easier to show some demonstrations. But yeah, we'll have another episode in probably about a week or so's time. But also I want to say a good shout out to my really good friend Tim Abel. I'll put the links in the show notes. But he set up a public Trello board. So if you want, there'll be a link down there as well. Feel free to add any sort of ideas about what you'd like me to cover in a future episode of Just 5 Minutes, which at this rate, we've gone into nearly 6.5 minutes, which there you go. It's very much a little bit of guesswork on the timings here. So until next time, I'm going to say goodbye and hopefully everybody keeps well, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.